because it's too real.
Oh, that would be great.
Would have never figured it
So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm gonna make this announcement again, also especially to our, members on Zoom. Give me a second. So we're gonna start a little late because those of us that are here in person, it's been a real challenge to find parking space, so I was some of the members are circling the, like, in front of circling here, they can try to find a parking place. So if everybody can just bear with us, as soon as we possibly can, we will start. We're going to be respectful of your time, so I just wanted to let you know why we might need a little time. And starting from.
Say Harold.
Yes. Right.
So ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get started, because we know that many of you have a hard stop at 12 or 10 early. And so we are going to be starting. And, okay. Okay.
So take care of yourself.
Good, good. And I see so many familiar faces, but again, my name is Rick Williams. I'm the chair, co-chair Dan Nuttleton, and here representing NWP here, but more importantly, part of this body. And important, yeah, we have a choice to get this. So we want to go quick, because there are some faces. If you could just tell your name and what organization you represent. We'll do that. We've got people on Zoom to do the same thing, and then we will commence with our meeting. My dear friend.
Sir, Harold Lane, Delaware Department of Corrections.
Michael Stanley, Harrington Department of Corrections, Planning Research and Management Service Manager.
Yeah, good to see you again.
Oh, you're right, Delaware Division. Don't be up here about
Pleasure.
Ilya Memphis, DSCYF.
Bill Thornton, Department of Labor.
Keisha Winchester, DOC.
John Starkey, Government Relations at the
Great, great. Great seeing you.
How are you?
Andrea Cooper, Department of Corrections. Fatima Smith, Department of Corrections. Equity Consortium.
Here's Racial Equity Consortium.
Economic Coalition and NAACP.
Great, great. And we'll start with you, Mr. Scott.
Good morning, Willie Scott, Delaware Sierra Club chapter.
Good. And welcome Representative Johnson for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you. This is Representative Kendra Johnson of the 5th District and also serving as the chair of the Delaware Legislative Black Caucus. Thank you for having me this morning. Representative Bolton asked that I attend considering she had a conflict.
Good, good. And we just so happy that you could fit us into your schedule. Thank you so much. And last but not least, please, Michael, you introduce yourself. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yes, okay, great. So we're going to turn it over to our executive director to get it started.
Yes, good morning and welcome to our Racial Equity Consortium meeting. On the agenda, we just did a roll call and everyone who's a part of, and you signed in. If you have not, please sign in. And then those who were on the line, you have to be online to sign in for tonight, this afternoon, this morning. The agenda, we said that was going to, are there any changes to the agenda? Anybody want to add anything? If you have the agenda to see it. And because we do not yet have a quorum, we will have to table the approval of the minutes. A lot of the members did call me this morning, they had prior engagements. So what we're gonna do as we go down to some direct updates, talk about electronic voting, and we'll probably do that as well. So we move on to our Racial Equity Consortium updates first, and then after that, we will have the subcommittee reports and closing remarks. So I just wanted to give everyone an update of what the Racial Equity Consortium is doing, and again, how U.S. members can assist with what's going on. The first thing that we are doing, we are having a conference. We're hosting a conference with the Delaware Legislative Black Caucus. The Agenda Unapologetically Black Conference will be held on Monday, February 10th, 2025. And this conference will just again highlight the work of the Delaware Legislative Black Caucus, the issues that are important to members of the community, as well as work that Racial Equity Consortium is doing. So what you see on the slide for you is save the date. We will send it out to everyone. The QR code is registration. So we're really moving forward. All members of the Delaware Legislative Black Caucus will be in attendance. They are slated to be on panel to speak about the different issues that align with the work of the Racial Equity Consortium. And we have a couple of guest speakers. We're still solidifying their participation, but that is something that we are doing. Michael working with us. And again, any assistance you all want to provide. Our lead contact is similar areas. So then we're also working in partnership with the United Way and the Delaware Racial Justice Collaborative. There are a lot of organizations here in the state that do the same thing. So we don't work across purposes, we want to work together. So the Racial Equity Consortium had a meeting with the Delaware Racial Justice Collaborative, and some ideas that we're going to do are helping with the Black Student Summit, the Minority Small Business Expo. We were going to have a joint legislative policy event. And again, helping with working with the Delaware Legislative Black Caucus Conference. Any questions? Okay. We are also working with the Delaware Legislative Black Caucus on the equity impact assessments. And those are trying to figure out legislation, how it would impact communities of color. Different states already have this. Delaware is still working on trying to figure out how this can be done. And I was contacted by Senator Marie Pinckney to find out what is the capacity, not only of the Racial Equity Consortium, but also Delaware State University. grant is 1 people, so we know the capacities. However, there are many researchers and educators here on campus that may be willing to assist with this information. I reached out to the deans of the university. They gave me some names of people who they want to work with. And yes, we are very excited that we're in a process of discussing that. So when the time comes, all of those are in your agencies, and know there's a transition happening, but still think about that we can help figure out what the equity impact will be on people of color in terms of the legislation. And I will send, there is Maryland, there was a report that was done, and I'll send it out to you all so you just have the information and be informed of what's going on. So that's something that we are doing, that's going down. Jennifer?
And well, I was gonna say, welcome, we have some people who just joined us. They went through, I'm sure, the great part of this great part.
Yes.
But again, if you just, entered the room, again, we have been some early introductions with you. One of the persons who just joined us, we did, Jody Warren. My Christopher Jennifer, we'll start with you.
Okay, also, good morning, everyone. I'm Jen Tompkins, and I'm the president and CEO of the Wilmington Urban League.
Yes.
Good morning, everyone. Green Mountain, we're interim vice president for strategic development expansion.
Welcome.
And we have, Doug is online.
Doug.
And, someone else just walked in. Dr. Boston, may you introduce yourself, please?
Good morning.
Good morning to all. I'm Mildred Papa-Foster, and I'm a former employee of Delaware State University, in the volunteer department, and the Energy Graduate Studies responsible programs and research. So it's good to be here.
And we're so glad to have you with your wonderful smile.
Yes.
And just an FYI, that's my mom.
Yeah.
Smile comes naturally. Okay. Please join us at the table.
And other things that we are doing, we're still being very intentional on our programming so that we can make sure that we are addressing the needs of the students. We have a program scheduled that will talk about the election, what it means, and to arm the students in what they can do in the future. That's what's postponed because the person we want to have talk about mental health couldn't come. So we're not just giving them do this. We want them also to have an opportunity to have a safe space as well. And there are some, including me, who struggled a lot with the election results, still struggling, but all is not lost. So this program will be rescheduled probably in December, and if not, definitely in January, because again, January is when it really starts happening, and we want to inform and empower our students in terms of what they can do and what's at stake.
And I would say the other thing too, it's an intentional focus to reinforce again and again that this initiative is a statewide initiative. And if you notice the partnerships and the relationships that we're in the midst of establishing and continuation of the course, are organizations that have a statewide focus. Because the issues don't stop in Newcastle, they don't stop in Canada, so they can cross all the borders that we can all imagine. And so it's going to take all of us, it's going to take all of us and all of our different organizations, all of us going in the right direction. That was even a target even before the most recent election. And the most recent election, I know I'm preaching to the choir, just heightened our need to really focus, put all of our side issues and differences on the back burner and really focus on the important work that's in front of us for the next few years and beyond. So it's a challenge, but I think it's a challenge that we're all strong enough, focused enough to meet. And one of the things we talk about the Delaware way and Delaware being small, whatever, sometimes the size can be an impediment, but sometimes it also can be a strength because it's not that much of an effort for us to cross county lines and for us to work together and have real important, sustained working relationships. So I just think that we have that opportunity in front of us. And I think in every opportunity, we're going to try to maximize that as much as possible. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And something that we're also doing is working on implementing the HB 198, and it is law in the state of Delaware, mandatory that they teach Black history at all levels of education, but it's on the onus of each of the school districts. But as we mentioned last session, there was conversation that we, as the Racial Equity Consortium, can provide a framework and background to give to the state. They can have a general curriculum that how to teach history, Black history. So we met with but the first, and we met with Dr. Truth, and as you all recall, they came to this meeting in January, talk about their work. We met with Michael Sullivan, who's key point person for the Delaware Department of Education, talk about teaching Black history. And we met also with a young lady named Dawn Patterson. She is an educator. She's a Black history buff, particularly the Underground Railroad. And she has also focused on teaching Delaware history, Black history. She has traveled up and down the state and researched cities, Black cities that were in the past, known cities, but the history about communities, Black communities in the state. And she has volunteered, she's going to be a contractor to help create curriculum that's focusing on Delaware's. So in December, after Thanksgiving, I'm meeting with Dr. Feldman again to make sure that what we're doing is hitting those history standards, teaching standards. So we're just not out there, but it has to be what needs to be done to make sure that Delaware history is being taught. And I would be remiss not to say that because we did not have a researcher, someone involved. I did elicit the support of my mom, which is why she's here. She's a researcher and an educator, and she also helps with some of the research and how we can help provide a framework to implement HB 198. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the education subcommittee report, but I just wanted to let you all know what we are doing as the Racial Equity Consortium. And I think that is it.
And I was just going to add, since we're among friends, and the 198, and the former superintendent school district. Some school districts are very receptive to the concept, and some are not. So our challenge is going to be fighting and making sure that we provide the tools and information and the oversight and help with the oversight statewide, because it's going to take nothing. I think many of us are aware that curriculum and implementation of curriculum has traditionally been a local initiative. Local school districts have had the lion's share of responsibility for that, but this particular initiative is nothing like that. So important that it's going to take that additional nudge. It's going to take that additional work and having very frank conversations with leaders to ensure that they understand that this is not a fly-by-night thought on our part. That commitment is strong statewide, and that we just have to get it done because it's important and imperative for our young people to be exposed to all avenues of history and not to have monopolies. And I'm not a Pollyanna. I know that as we move forward, the winds are slightly different than what they were previous before November 5th, but that doesn't mean that we still don't, that we don't continue to fight the good fight, because it is a good fight. We're going to do this. It's just, felt I need to say that.
All right, and finally, as we move forward, we're going to, again, we have to be very intentional in what we're doing. Today, we'll have an opportunity to talk about some of the recommendations set forth from the subcommittees. However, there's no problem, we do not have a quorum yet. Therefore, we are going to implement electronic voting. So the recommendations will be sent out for everyone to read and review, and then have an opportunity to vote electronically so that we can move forward. Again, as I said, we want to have a joint policy agenda statement with the Delaware Racial Justice Collaborative and the Racial Equity Consortium. And we also want to provide information to our friends in the Delaware Legislative, Black Legislative Caucus and the General Assembly as a whole for different recommendations that we, as a Racial Equity Consortium, feel that need to go forward. So we don't want to wait till we get a quorum, but be able to continue to do the work in the season or in the months that we don't meet in person here. Okay.
Maybe, yes, Mr. Johnson, you want that?
Yes, before we go into our subcommittee votes, updates, I would like to invite Representative Kendra Johnson to bring a few words. As you all know, and as she mentioned, she is a member of the Delaware Legislative Black Caucus, General Assembly, and she's actually the chair of the Delaware Legislative Black Caucus. So, Representative Johnson, you have the floor.
Well, thank you. That was unexpected, but I appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. I am not showing my face because I am still working through getting over germs. And you may notice I'm a little bit more nasally than I usually am, and that is because of the wonders of getting a cold. I'm really happy to sit in today and listen. I've been meeting. How long have we been meeting? Also, maybe the last couple months. Just getting up to date on what you all have been doing and what the plans are as we move forward, and I am encouraged. I am extremely excited about the upcoming event that Senator Darius Brown has been working with the team on, as it'll give us an opportunity to pull people together and remind folks of some of the things that the Delaware Legislative Black Caucus have been able to achieve. You know, they say, tell them again, and then tell them again what you just told them. Because too many times in our communities, amazing things happen and we don't celebrate those successes the way we ought to. And this forum, I think, will give us that opportunity to re-educate folks and to celebrate the successes. Also create shared vision and passion about how we move forward as a community here in Delaware. I'm also equally excited about the initiatives that were talked about as it relates to the racial equity impact. And I think that is extremely important because oftentimes in creating legislation, what we don't always know or consider are those racial impacts. And completing additional research on given topics and literally drilling down to ask yourself the questions of how will this piece of legislation impact Black and Brown and marginalized communities, and allow that to guide your next step, I think is important. It is beyond important. So I'm thrilled about that as well. As I said, I came today as a visitor to listen, and I want to stay connected and be a support to this group as you continue to carry out the work that was started by the Delaware Legislative Black Caucus as it relates to our African American Task Force, because this body was a recommendation that came from that task force. So I want you all to know that I am here to be of support, to listen, and let's get it, y'all. We got work to do. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate your comments and your support, and we look forward to working with you and the rest of the members of that caucus and others in this important work to make some significant changes and make things better for Black and brown citizens and marginal individuals as well. So thank you very much for your help and support.
So we will
My
now
pleasure.
Thank you very much. We will now start with the recommendations or reports from the subcommittees. We'll start with environmental, infrastructure and environment. Scott, Michael, pull up the slides.
Okay, great, thanks. Great, well, again, good morning, everybody. I thought it'd be worthwhile to kind of walk through an overview of what's called HB 422, or the Healthy Communities and Environmental Justice Act. It's also known as the People's Anti-Pollution Act, and it sometimes has been called the Cumulative Impact Bill. So to avoid confusion, I'll just call it the bill, as we talked this morning. So this bill is referenced in one of our Infrastructure and Environmental Subcommittee recommendations. And as such, I thought it would be helpful, to provide the full committee with more insight into the bill, how it actually connects to the recommendation that we have from the I&E subcommittee. Next page. So to that end, we'll kind of take a quick overview of the I&E recommendation, just to kind of refamiliarize. It's still early in the morning for me. The committee with what that recommendation stated. I'll do a quick overview of the bill and highlight some of its key aspects, and review how the bill and the recommendation relate. So how those two things connect, what's really addressed by HB 422, and how does that relate to the recommendation that we have? So what's in it, what's not, kind of the issue that. And then naturally, hopefully have some time for discussion, Q&A, and any comments that anyone might have. Thanks. So here's kind of an abstract of the I&E subcommittee recommendation. And again, this is recommendation number 1 in regards to the establishment of a statewide EJ board, or Environmental Justice Board. And the key requirements for the board are shown here. The board should be public facing, accessible and responsible to the affected communities. The board should have authority for oversight of decision making affecting communities already overburdened by disproportionate levels of pollution. The board should be able to advise the Secretary of DENREC and the governor on ways to better address current and historic environmental injustices across the state, using the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council as a model. And as we kind of indicated a little while ago, the future administration will likely weaken or eliminate many policies of the Biden administration, but those policies and models from other states should continue to provide examples of best practices for use and advance in Delaware's efforts related to environmental justice. So that's kind of an overview of what the recommendation from the I&E committee, looks like as it stands today. And we'll come back and revisit that towards the end to see how well we're connected versus what HB 422 would provide. Next slide. So what is HB 422? It's fundamentally an amendment to Title VII, which is the primary state environmental law. And it specifically addresses how environmental permits are managed in overburdened communities with the intent of reducing the cumulative impacts of pollution and also improving community engagement and communications. Inspiration for the bill came from the passage of a cumulative impacts legislation in New Jersey back in 2019, I think it was. And somewhere in 2020, a group of community environmental leaders and environmental organizations formed what's now called the Delaware Environmental Accountability Coalition. And the purpose of that coalition was to construct a bill that was specific to the needs of Delaware's EJ communities, where we have issues of legacy pollution and the remaining sources from those former industries, existing heavy industries, and industrial poultry farms, which are all intermingled with residential areas. So that creates this juxtaposition of industry and people living in the same space. The original bill, which was then called HB 422, was filed, 466. It was filed in the late 2021-2022 session, and then refiled late in the last session as HB 422. So that's how the name shifted, over time. But we did have an opportunity through those delays to make further refinements to the bill to hopefully improve its quality and benefit to the communities that it's designed to improve. Representatives Johnson and Lambert have been the prime sponsor and co-sponsor. We've also had other co-sponsors from both chambers to sign on since the original introduction of the bill. The bill is supported by the Delaware Legislative Black Caucus, and we do plan to reintroduce the bill in the upcoming session. Next slide. So here's kind of a high-level overview of the bill's key features and how they compare to the current practices used by DNREC. So you can see that comparative there. So in the proposed legislation, we would identify overburdened communities based on their proximity to sources of pollution and certain racial and economic demographics that are based on the U.S. Census data. So again, there's an opportunity for us to say, okay, who are the communities, or where are the communities that we have the most concern about? The types of facilities that emit significant levels of toxic emissions are identified, and if those facilities are applying for a permit to build a new facility or expand an existing facility, or even just to renew a permit for an existing facility, they would have to go through greater scrutiny if they're existing in one of these overburdened communities. We'll talk about some of that scrutiny here in a second. Part of the process is that DNREC would be required to assess the cumulative impact of these proposed projects. In other words, they'd have to perform what's called an environmental justice impact report. And that means that that would have to be a quantitative assessment of the existing pollution from all sources, and that would include things like traffic in the surrounding area, existing industrial facilities, landfills, or any other form of pollution that that particular community might be exposed to. So they would have to consider what's existing, plus the emissions from the proposed new project. And in contrast, today, only the emissions from the new project are considered. And generally speaking, if those emissions meet the federal guidelines in terms of levels and types, then the project is typically permitted. So that's another significant change. But as we've talked to various communities, one of the biggest issues that we find that communities confront is that permits are often approved without there even being aware that a permit was being applied for. So we were looking to make significant changes in areas of communications and outreach, and those will be required with things like mandatory information sessions, public hearings in the affected community, publication of the hearing meeting notices in the dominant language of the community and in various forms of media to ensure we had good reach. Even having multiple sessions for permit applications. And in some cases, we'll find that, particularly with a new facility or a significant expansion, there'll be a variety of permits that are being applied for. And the current practice has been to try to deal with all of those as as a bundle, so to speak, which can be overwhelming for, community members to try to keep up with what's being asked for and how that might potentially affect them. The other thing that we see is that today, when public hearings are, or I should say when a permit's announced, typically there's not a public hearing. unless one's requested, and that has to be requested by somebody that has standing in the community and a clear understanding of the permit request, which makes it complicated. And there are no informational meetings unless DNREC, at their discretion decides to have one. And one key difference here between a public hearing and an informational session is that in a public hearing, you can stand up and state your position on a permit application. In other words, I'm for it or I'm against it, and here's why. But that hearing is not a two-way process. It does not give residents an opportunity to ask questions, get their questions answered, have some dialogue around what's being proposed. And that would be supported by, well, that type of dialogue would be supported by the informational meeting. So that's why we wanted to insert that forum as well, to make sure that people have the opportunity to ask questions, get answers, and also have those responses be part of the public record, so that there is an opportunity for recourse later on in case things aren't quite what they were proposed to be. We'd also ask that the company who's applying for the permit to assign a community liaison who will be responsible for community outreach and also serve as a point of contact for community members. So again, a point of contact that community members can use to ask questions and again, get more information about what's being proposed prior to the public hearing. So again, a lot of work around communications and outreach, and there are other elements that I'm not going to go over, but they're included as well. We also ask that any outstanding fines and penalties be resolved before the application is made. We talked about an environmental justice board that will be established, and that's really none of the conversation here. So we'll come back to that in a little bit and talk more about what that environmental justice board actually does, how it's composed, and contrast that to what's being requested in recommendation number 1. There's a process called, well, I won't call it a process, there's a system of using emission reduction credits to offset new emissions. And in this bill, we would say that those credits could not be used as an artificial offset for emissions from a new facility or an expansion of a facility, because in effect, those credits don't reduce the actual emissions coming from the facility. They only reduce the threshold, so to speak, that will be allowed under the permit. So we're asking that those be discontinued, or that use to be discontinued in overburdened communities. And then lastly here, probably more importantly, the bill would give DNREC the authority to reject permits for a new or expanded facility if excessive cumulative impacts cannot be mitigated. And that's a capability that DNREC doesn't currently have. So, Michael, if you're driving the charts, I'm going to ask you to do something for me and skip down into the appendix. There's a flow chart there that is titled, How Does It Work? You can jump through all of that. There we go. So, having said all of that, this is kind of a simplified view of what the permitting process would look like in an overburdened community. So we've got a couple of key elements here, one being the facility. And if that facility is defined by the bill as one of those that are a concern for us, and just as a comment, those facilities are normally significant in nature in terms of scope, size, and levels of emissions. So we're not talking about mom and pop shops, gas stations or other things or other facilities that might be beneficial to the community, but still require an environmental permit. We're looking at, a different level of scope and a different rate of emissions than what you might see produced from those. But if that facility is located in an overburdened community, then, these are the steps they would have to go through. The applicant would submit an environmental justice impact report. And again, that's to assess the cumulative effects of that particular proposal in conjunction with the existing pollution in the area. There would have to be at least one community information session, and that would be held in the affected community in the presence of DNREC and the EJ board, where details of the project and the outcome of the report are discussed. That meeting would be part of the public record, as I mentioned earlier. There'd be at least one public hearing to be held in the affected community. The EJ board would make a recommendation to DNREC on its views of whether or not that permit should be approved. And then DNREC naturally will make the final decision based on inputs from the Environmental Justice Impact Report, the EJ board, and community feedback from the two forums that we mentioned earlier. That will be in addition to the agency's experts and their view on the application itself. So that will be the DNREC decision-making process. And, you know, if it's a new project or the expansion of an existing facility, DNREC would have the option of either denying the permit or applying conditions to the permit or just flat out approving it. You know, so those are the three choices they would have. For renewals of an existing permit, so this is a company or an industry that's been in operation for a while, and they're just going through the motions of, you know, their once every 10-year permit renewals. Even in those cases, even though DNREC would not necessarily deny the permit, they still would have the option to apply conditions to, you know, help reduce or mitigate pollution coming from that facility. And if at the end of the day, the decision that DNREC makes, you know, differs from the EJ board's recommendation, that rationale must be part of the secretary's published decision on the permit itself. So that's kind of an overview of how the process will work as it relates to HB 422. And again, this is specific to overburdened communities and certain facilities that would look to operate in those communities. Okay, Mike, if you can slide back up to what was originally, I guess, number 6. Very good, thank you. So as for the EJ board, and this is where, you know, I think the discussion becomes even more relative to the commission, or the consortium, I'm sorry. Here's some of the roles and responsibilities of the EJ board as they're described in HB 422. The board would naturally advise the DNREC secretary on permit applications. We kind of talked about that a bit. The board would also have several administrative functions, such as ensuring the criteria for defining overburdened communities are adequate and the listing is up to date, as well as ensuring the list of facilities of concern is up to date, you know, particularly as new industrial ventures evolve. And we had a recent example of that, you know, after we wrote the first draft. This whole concept of hydrogen production and hydrogen hubs came into the forefront, and that's not a technology that we had listed originally. So we had to go back and kind of update the facilities list to ensure that, you know, those types of facilities were covered too, if in fact they were looking to operate, you know, in an overburdened community. So the notion here is that that list needs to be maintained and updated over time, and that would be one of the board functions. The board would also be engaged in developing and revising the policies and regulations required to administer the legislation and identifying opportunities to mitigate or reduce emissions in overburdened communities. So that, for example, would include things like suggesting that there be additional air quality monitoring, particularly when, you know, a permit's been approved based on some assumptions that were used in the Environmental Justice Impact Report. You know, how do we confirm that, you know, those assumptions were accurate and that the emissions coming from that new project, a new facility, do in fact meet, you know, the assumptions that were used in that assessment. So that would be that kind of responsibility as well. And we still, you know, have what we call concentrated animal feeding operations or CAPOs, and these are, for example, the large poultry farms that we have down in the southern part of the state. This bill does cover those facilities as well, but there's still some gaps in how DNREC provides oversight for managing, you know, poultry farming in the state. And I think the board would have a responsibility to continue to work with DNREC and the Department of Agriculture to close those gaps so that we're comfortable that those facilities are being managed in a sustainable form. So that's kind of an overview of the role of the board that's described in HB 422. The next slide shows the composition of the board. In terms of membership, the board would have 9 members. 6 of those members would be members of overburdened communities, people that actually live in overburdened communities. And those will be appointed by either the Speaker of the House or the Senate President Pro Tem. The other 3 members will be appointed by DNREC. And one of those members would have to have, you know, some public health expertise, which I think is a requirement within this body to ensure that, you know, we have the right perspective around what's being done from a health impact standpoint. The board could also bring in other non-voting members to provide any necessary expertise as they get into particular issues. And fundamentally, the members would serve 4-year terms once we got through that first cycle. And that first cycle is designed to eliminate any, you know, eliminate or create overlap, I should say, so that we don't have members rolling in and off of the board all at the same time, but to stagger those terms. But 4-year terms, you know, would be the norm. So that's kind of an oversight or an overview, I should say, of what the Environmental Justice Board that's described in HB 422 would look like. So if we go to the next chart and compare that to, you know, what we've described in recommendation number 1 from the subcommittee. And then what we said there is that the General Assembly should establish a state environmental justice board. That board should be public facing. HB 422, the board that's described in that bill, is in fact public facing. So I think we got that covered. The other requirement is that that board the board should have statutory authority to provide oversight for decisions affecting overburdened communities. I think the answer to that is yes for HB 422 as it relates to environmental permitting. Where there's a gap, though, is that HB 422 does not address other issues or related to the environment in overburdened communities. So, for example, things like zoning, and then there are other municipal ordinances that this bill doesn't address as well. And, you know, just for information, you know, most zoning decisions are at the municipal level, not at the state level. And then municipalities typically have purview over that. So that's not one of the elements that's covered in HB 422. The other requirement is to provide independent advice and recommendations on how to increase the state government's efforts to address current and historic environmental injustice, I should say, as modeled by the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council. I think we do have that avenue created in HB 422 as it relates to the Secretary of DNREC, but there's no reference in HB 422 in terms of providing advice and guidance to the governor's office. So that's a gap. So, you know, since you step back and look at this, the EJ board that's in HB 422 is pretty narrowly focused on the permitting process. So I think the question for the broader committee here, and maybe even for the subcommittee to work a little bit more on, is whether or not the EJ board that's described in HB 422 meets the needs, spirit, and intent of the recommendation we have here. Or, you know, do we need to look at alternatives to close any of the gaps that we think are important or significant? You know, like having that path towards the governor in terms of making recommendations and advisements, or in terms of you know, how we address some of the other peripheral issues around the environmental issues in overburdened communities. So those are open questions, I think, you know, for the board. Oh, I'm sorry, for the consortium. And, you know, so any feedback on those would be appreciated. So any thoughts, questions, feedback on path forward?
Other questions, comments? Besides a very extensive, well, focus report taking discussion. Other questions about that? What about from members that are voting members that are with us electronically? Questions? I would say that our next step forward, Mr. Scott, for you and your committee, first of all, thank you for the outstanding work. And we will take a vote electronically because we have to vote on it electronically. And then, because we don't want to stop, because our next gathering of this nature will be January 28th, and that's too late. So we're going to have this mechanism in place to give you the feedback that you need so that you can continue and that you can that you'll have more official endorsement via electronic means so that you can move forward. Is that perceptive to you?
Yeah, that works for me, and if, if it helps, I can help try to frame up the question for the vote, but you may have enough information already to do that.
Great. And I think those questions that we had would be very, very helpful to those, excuse me, those voting members that were not in attendance to inform me. But again, thank you very much, and we will make sure that we get this done in a timely fashion so that you can continue, and you and the committee can continue to work, and we can move forward. But, just
Very
a gigantic thank you to not emphasize our appreciation for your work.
No problem. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you. So I'm Caitlin Del Palo. I'm Chief Strategy Advisor at DSHA, and I chair our Housing Subcommittee. Apologies for my tardiness today. Unfortunately, my group was not able to meet this past month, but that does not mean that the work is not happening. Part of the reason why we weren't able to meet is because I am staffing the Affordable Housing Production Task Force and its 5 subcommittees. And Representative Johnson is actually one of our 3 co-chairs for that task force, so shout out to her. And actually, this task force, I think, helps to fulfill one of the original recommendations that came from the African American Task Force. So specifically, I've got it pulled up on my laptop here. One of the recommendations from the Infrastructure and Environment Subcommittee of the African American Task Force, which also looked at housing, was DSHA should conduct a study on ways that the General Assembly can address the supply of and access to affordable housing in all of its forms. In 2023, DSHA published its statewide housing needs assessment, which tells us how many rental units we are currently short. And it also tells us how many more housing units we need to keep up with growth through 2030. So that report informed the creation of HB 442, which created the Affordable Housing Production Task Force. That task force is charged with recommending ways that both the state and local governments can increase the supply of housing that is affordable to households across the income spectrum. And I want to pause here for a minute and stress that affordability is relative. Right? It's tied to income. Housing is considered affordable if the household is paying no more than 30% of their household budget, right? So what's affordable for somebody making $100,000 a year is going to be different than what's affordable for somebody making $50,000 a year. So, sure.
If I can use, you're talking about social class levels. You gave a great narrative there. You said a person making 100,000 compared to another person making 30 or 40,000. Again, we're doing implicitly, we're looking at social class levels, which can create other slides.
Well, so, I mean, yes, you could look at it that way, but what we learned from the study is that we have a need for housing pretty much at all of those levels, right? We need more housing to serve people that are making 0 to 30% of area median income, but we also need housing to serve people at 31 to 50 and on and on and on. And so the housing needs assessment really was the impetus for creating the task force, right? We know we need housing that's affordable at different levels throughout the state. How do we do that? So the task force has 5 subcommittees that are doing the real nitty-gritty work, and those are broken out into different topics. There's finance and development, so looking at the funding side of things. There's construction, so looking at our workforce, but also like construction costs, materials, etc. Manufactured housing. Manufactured housing is kind of its own special thing because the funding sources that can support it are just very different from traditional stick-built housing. We have regulatory and permitting, so that deals with local level land use and zoning policies, which are hugely important. And then we have a community focus group subcommittee, and that subcommittee is required to have representation from certain populations, including veterans, seniors, persons with disabilities, victims of violence. This wasn't written into the bill, but we're also looking at the reentry population. So we're trying to be mindful of how can we promote housing access, not only for everybody across the income spectrum, but for populations that have specific challenges. So the task force is due to report to the governor and the General Assembly by March 1st of this coming year. We have already begun meeting. We've had 2 full task force meetings, and each of the 5 subcommittees has met at least once. There's actually a subcommittee meeting happening right now on manufactured housing, but I wanted to be here, so my colleagues are doing that one. Regulatory and permitting is happening Thursday. Finance and construction are meeting on Friday, so we're in full swing. But what I really want to talk about is land use and zoning, as I mentioned, happens at the local level. So your town or your city or your county gets to decide what types of housing can be built and where. And when I say types of housing, I mean, can we have a single family detached housing on a lot? Can we have attached housing, a townhouse, a row house? Can we have duplexes? Can we have small, medium, or large apartments or condos? All of that is controlled at the local level. And unfortunately, I think a lot of our local governments have zoning and land use practices that primarily produce single-family detached housing to the exclusion of other housing types. And we know that those single-family detached homes are typically more expensive to purchase, typically more expensive to occupy as a renter. And we can also see that, you know, overwhelmingly white Delawareans live in single-family detached housing. But if you look at other races, right, Black Delawareans, Asian Delawareans, people of multiple races, do not live in single-family detached housing. They typically are living in those other housing types because they're more affordable. So if your local government is not allowing those housing types to be built, that's problematic. That is where we get into potential fair housing violations. So the Fair Housing Act does apply to local land use policies, but it doesn't preempt them, right? So the Fair Housing Act doesn't say you can't, you know, do a specific zoning thing. But if that specific zoning practice produces discriminatory effects, you could be in trouble.
Right. Caitlin, I was going to, Newark specific, because that's the area I'm representing WSP. It's no secret that the universities has, you know, conjunction either directly or with developers. There's just been an onslaught on lack of affordable housing. I thought the 2 things you said before you left, that whole affordable housing, first of all, that whole definition is, you know, it's kind of murky in terms of understanding, because what may be affordable housing to me may not be to other people. And I know historically, there's the African American community, specifically in Newark, which I grew up in, is not existent. So it's kind of personal for me. And what we, in fact, was when I was at the city council meeting last night, and talking about this issue and stressing the point that somehow, some way, there has to be affordable opportunities for housing for all, because right now that's the case. And your point is well taken, that developers are creating opportunities, but those opportunities still by and large fall in the hands of students, because they can afford it, they can, as the prices go up, it forces people out who want to come back to Newark who can't. So it's truly an issue that in WSP at our level, we are strongly concerned and interested in that. I'm sure we'll be working with your committee to see how we can do some stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to screen share our webpage if I can, Michael, just to show everybody where all the information about the task force lives. Let me see if I can share my screen. First, I gotta close some windows. Okay. So here we go. So this is a web page off of DSHA's website. So this is again where all of the information about the task force is being documented. So we have, of course, a link to the bill that created the task force. We have a link to the slide presentation that shows the structure and the timeline that we're working with. That's my contact information. I'm a staffer. This is the recording of our most recent full task force meeting. All of our meetings are recorded. All of them are conducted in hybrid format, and they are all open to the public. So we very much want people to participate. Right here, you can see our co-chairs. So DSHA Director Carney, Representative Johnson, and Senator Huxtable. Down here, we have our list of full members. So there are 20 in total. And then we also have, of course, our 5 subcommittees. So if you click on these drop downs, you can see when the next meeting is for that subcommittee and who is a part of it. So I won't click on all of that, but then last but not least, this is where we're archiving everything. So if you want to see what happened during regulatory permitting, you just go here and then you can click on the meeting slides, you can watch the recording, and we have that for every meeting.
Thank you.
So, you know, I really encourage everybody to tune into these, especially regulatory permitting, because that's really where the policy lever is to get more diverse housing types to serve more people. Any questions related to that?
I was trying to finish. And the concern I have, as is everyone in affordable housing, and being Sussex County, we have an explosion of housing that are houses and developments that are coming up. And what I find is even in the multifamily houses that are coming up, they're still not conducive to the individual who needs affordable housing. When you find an apartment, a 1-bedroom apartment for $1,500 a month, that's not affordable housing for someone I'll just say someone working at McDonald's. So the fact of the matter is all of the housing is being built, it's not affordable. And what you said is true, it's the county council who is giving permission for this housing to be built. But the issue is that in your fair housing, how can it be, how can you address to the county councils the fact that some of this land needs to be utilized for affordable housing? And there was one time with the county council in Sussex, speaking of Sussex, that a certain portion of any development had to be developed in a manner that those people, affordable housing would be available. But somehow they pushed it to a back burner, and I haven't heard it come up anymore. And I will admit that I haven't been to a county council meeting in a while. But the fact of the matter is, it's something that needs to be addressed. I don't know whether through your task force you can develop something, come up with some type of strategy to present to them, to ensure that there is actual affordable housing coming. There's housing being built in Sussex County. I don't know where all the people are going to live, all the people are going to come from to live in the housing that's being built. So the key is it's not affordable.
I totally agree. A couple of thoughts on that. You're right, the developers we are building units, and we are building enough units. They're just not affordable to the people that are already here. And again, I think a lot of that goes back to zoning, right? Most of the residential land in anywhere in Delaware and really in the nation is zoned to allow single-family detached as a permitted use or by right. Meaning, if that's what you want to build, you can build it. You don't have to have a public hearing. You don't have to, do an additional site plan review. Like, you can do it. Unfortunately, a lot of the other housing types can only be built after a public hearing or after getting a variance or a conditional use permit. And as soon as you put those types of restrictions on those housing developments, you're now talking about more time, which raises the cost for the developer, which the developer then has to pass on to the end, renter or buyer, right? So if we could change those local level policies so that we are allowed to do these housing types by right, I think that would cut down the amount of time that it takes to develop and therefore the cost. And at that point, the developer would be able to pass on those savings so that it could be rented affordably or sold affordably. That's, I think, probably an oversimplification, but that's, you know, we've got to make it easier and more predictable for developers to build the housing types that we know could be affordable if we treated them the same way that we treat those single-family detached neighborhoods.
What I'm finding is there are people that are trying to buy homes that were once like a couple $100,000 that are now inflated to like 400,000. And there's been an influx of individuals from like New York, New Jersey that have come down and pay that because that's what they're paying. So buy the house out now, and then it's causing issues with people that live here. One paying the kind of money they make, so is that paying for? I mean,
That particular issue has been brought up in our discussions. I don't know that we've settled on like a policy solution, but one thing that comes to mind for me is, you know, getting creative. Could a local government provide incentives to a developer in exchange for that developer setting aside a specific number of units for current residents or for people who work in the town? That way we know those units are not going to get snatched up by somebody from Connecticut, New York, New Jersey. But you know, that's something that local governments would have to do, right? You'd have to put restrictions in place. There'd have to be administrative oversight over that, but it can be done. So I think those are exactly the types of conversations that we're trying to have right now.
And one other thing, in the fair housing aspect, if you take into consideration what the young lady just said, is that oftentimes those type of issues are used to segregate the community. Because if you are not of a certain class, you're not able to purchase a home within this particular area. And so that's how they determine exactly who it is going to move into a development. And they make sure that the undesirables are not there. So that's something that really needs to be looked into. I might appear because of my income, I may not be able to afford a house to be developed. That does not mean I'm not worthy to be part of that community.
And I know too that there are some situations, you know, right outside the city. Actually, around for development, that's probably maybe a year or two old. Was set up with mixed groups and there was a set aside, which was a great concept. But I guess my point I'm trying to make is that that's the exception. And if there were more situations like that, you know, it could address some of our shortages and opportunities. But that concept, to me, is the right one. But it's not. I'll just speak from the North perspective. Clearly, that's not the model that's being used, and it's more. Again, using Main Street as an example, buildings are going up, but the concept and the target area and the target people are still the same.
Man, we open it, maybe oversight, street, distressed communities. But the builders are located in that area, and we're doing it for recreating distressed communities, beautify distressed communities. And then at the same time, we're going back to red light districts. So we want to get out of red light. That's what the government is trying to look at this and say, hey, because that was implicit. So we start looking at finances, we start playing with finances for right now, that same machine. I just come out of prison, he's incarcerated, young ladies come out of prison, and going to the community, they're saying basically, I don't want that person in this community. So you build those communities, it's almost like building facilities for that particular group of people. So now you're socially classifying them in this particular area, and you're separating them from others in society to say you cannot advance to be more very good. And it takes a whole lot, and I thank you for your work, which is also infrastructure.
Okay. My question, showing off that, we've talked in the past about this concentration of capital A subsidized and affordable housing. Is that something you're looking at? Or are there offenders who are worse than others municipality wise? Meaning, percentages of affordable housing as a percentage of total housing stock?
Yes, yes. So, my colleague Karen Horton has done a saturation analysis looking at the percentage of each municipality's housing stock that is subsidized in some way. And that would include things like public housing, so sites that DSHA owns or other housing authorities. That also includes low-income housing tax credit sites or LIHTC sites. Those are sites that DSHA helps to finance, but we don't own them or operate them. And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I know Laurel stands out. They have like 40-some% of their housing stock is subsidized in some way. So we have pockets.
That number is in Middletown.
I mean, Middletown would be one of the ones where there's almost no subsidized housing.
Right.
Same for like your Bethany Beaches,
North.
your Ardens. So yeah, there are pockets of concentrated poverty and there are pockets of concentrated privilege.
Yes.
And in our QAP, which is our qualified allocation plan, it's the plan that guides how we award tax credits. We incentivize developers to build in areas of opportunity so that we're not further concentrating poverty. But again, if the underlying municipal zoning does not easily facilitate that housing being built, it's not going to get done, right? Like we can help with the financing, but that building, that development has to be greenlit in the first place. And localities can make it easier or harder to do that. So that was my spiel.
Hey, thank you very much, sir, for being on the forefront of the work, and again, again, it's just one member of the body. I would just continue to say, keep doing what you're doing. Come back and let us know how we can support in terms of getting more involved in the work that you engage with, and also ultimately when it's time for us to take an official stance on issues, we can do it as a body. So we support your efforts 100%.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. Our plan is to have a full task force meeting in January. The date is we're still trying to figure that out. And that'll be the first opportunity for each of the subcommittees to report out their preliminary recommendations. We don't anticipate having final votes on recommendations until February.
So before I let you go, Caitlin, yesterday you guys signed a group coalition, I guess, I don't know what you call it, but with all the state housing authority agencies. Can you talk about that a little bit and like the platform in which people can sign up for
Decentralized wait lists?
centralized lists? Yeah.
Yes, okay, so thank you for bringing that up, that's a really big deal. So there are 5 public housing authorities in the state of Delaware that provide vouchers, and 4 of the 5 of us also do shared housing. Traditionally, we have all operated our own waiting lists. So if you want to get on all waiting lists, you got to go to 5 different places. That's not really a great system. So we have all partnered together, the 5 PHAs, and with the help of some consultants, we have created a centralized website. It's delaware.affordablehousing.com. And that is now a one-stop shop where you can apply to any or all of the PHA waiting lists. You'll also be able to track your application, update your information. So that we just had our press release this past Friday. The other thing to note is that we are asking anybody who's currently on any of our 5 waiting lists to update their information by this Friday. Letters were sent out last month to everybody who's on any of those waiting lists, letting them know you need to update your information, otherwise you'll be taken off the list. The intention is to clean up our list, to take off any folks who may have found housing since signing up. That way we have a clearer picture of how many people are actually in need of housing. And the goal is to be able to reopen our waiting lists at some point in the near future, because currently they are closed. So certainly if you know folks who are on the waiting list, absolutely tell them to go to delaware.affordablehousing.com. Thank you.
Great. I haven't seen that, but I just wondered because I had another phone that I play games and things on, and it came up on that phone. And so, I just thought it was so strange. But in the process, another group of people who I'm finding are being discriminated against for that are seniors. I'm not saying there are seniors who come from the city, who come into Delaware and pay tax for a house, but we still have seniors who need to move into senior housing. But because of the limited amount of housing, they are unable to move into a quality housing. So I don't know if that's one of the issues that your committee is looking at, but it would be something to take stock. I'm speaking about Sussex County because of how many people I find need to be in senior housing, but are unable to because there's no housing there.
Yeah, so our community focus group subcommittee has AARP Delaware's representative on that. So they are on top of, making sure that we're being mindful of senior housing needs.
Thank you. As always, thank you so much.
Yes, my pleasure.
Yeah, I know we were discussing this. Do you think the when build affordable housing tends to equity despair, a decline in equity if affordable housing gets close to a certain zone area?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Do you feel like we're lacking affordable housing because people are afraid that affordable housing will get closer to?
Absolutely, absolutely. 100%. There's affordable housing is stigmatized, right? People have assumptions about who lives there and what the environment is going to be when you live there. So that stigma is a huge challenge and NIMBYism, right? Not in my backyard. The attitude that we don't want more housing where we already live. What I would say is we can limit the ill effects of NIMBYism by allowing more housing types as a permitted use, allowing them by right. So that's what I would offer up.
Good. Thank you very much. And I know that you must return and what you're going to do first to mobilize and be sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, so good morning. I do apologize for my tardiness. I was on the phone with IRS. Couldn't handle it going down. Couldn't handle it going down. Yeah, so good morning. So our subcommittee is tasked with kind of looking at gun violence, voting. We get to some kind of expungement stuff too. And so I'll start with the gun violence, the group violence stuff that we're looking at and how to address and create safer communities throughout our state. And Mr. Mack and Sandra will chime in on any bullet point that we may have, especially as it relates to the marijuana stuff. But kind of across our state, you have a reduction in gun violence. I guess last 2 weeks there was some substantial gun violence in Wilmington that has now decreased because some folks are in jail now and they've arrested some folks. But WPD, all of our law enforcement partners, DOJ, probation and parole, DSP, Newcastle County, and downstate Dover, Western Sussex area, Laurel, Seaford, doing a phenomenal job addressing group and gang violence throughout our state. Group violence intervention, which originated in Wilmington, is now in Dover, been in Dover for almost 2 years. And now we're looking at Western Sussex area, Laurel, Seaford, Bridgeville, Delmar. And there's some groups down there. Their groups are kind of really gangs down there because they're real structured. And Wilmington is, the OMBs, the STKs, the North Packs, they're not really that structured. And there's really no hierarchy. So we kind of consider those groups and not gangs. If you get down Dover, you see the Bloods and Crips in different sets. Western Sussex, Bloods and Crips in kind of different sets. Family groups too. And so tomorrow, Thursday and Friday, we're doing a GVI 101 down in it's going to be in Milford, but we're going to be addressing the needs of Western Sussex. And so John Jay College and National Network coming down, going to do an assessment of the people, the groups, and kind of doing analysis on if it's needed down there. I think it's needed, and so the premise is we identify the people who are really involved in group and gang violence. Traditionally, what law enforcement officers did was throw a dragnet over the whole community and arrested so many different people that really didn't have anything to do with the group and gang violence and the quality of life issues, in hopes of just catching 3 or 4 people. What we've known recently as doing this work is that 1/2 of 1% of people in any community is involved in this quality of life in these communities. And so we address those needs. We do support and outreach mainly, but also law enforcement tactics also. And so the support and outreach is how do we get you out of this environment, this stinking thinking, the negative peer influences, things of that nature. How do we get you employed, back to school, maybe out of this housing unit? And as it relates to the Western Sussex and Laurel, you got Wexford Village, you got Little Creek, you have Hollybrook. That's what we're talking about. 40% of those areas are saturated with low income, they say Section 8 or, subsidized housing, which leaders in those communities think contributes to a lot of the violence. And so we're kind of looking at how to address those needs of the people who live in these environments, how to impact them in meaningful ways so they can be the police of their own communities. And so that's what we hope to accomplish there, but also reaching out to the people who are involved in group and gang violence up and down the state and give them a way out. It's all volunteer. We have about 350 people that's involved that are members of group violence intervention in Delaware. Of those 350, we've identified about 45 who are the upper echelon leaders. And we kind of have a subset of this group called LIT, Leaders in Transition. Leaders in Transition goes to the schools, the detention centers, fairs, speak to legislators about their transformation in their lives, but also how can they impact the communities in its entirety. In the LIT group, I would love for them to come and just talk about their experience, especially as it relates to group and gang violence, but how they have changed their lives around in meaningful ways to impact everybody that they come and encounter with. It's pretty amazing work. And I was part of one who John Cook and I created this LIT group in transition. And so as we look at group and gang violence, we also have to look at how law enforcement tactics are working. And I'm sorry.
I missed you. There is a conference tomorrow.
It's on Thursday, but it's a closed meeting down in Milford Police Department. Yeah, Thursday and Friday. I lost my train of thought. So that's all good. So now I would love for this LIT group to come in to us and present to us about it. Because what happens, right? We don't hear from the people who have been shot 10 times and has overcame that traumatic episode to now say, hey, I've changed my life around. Like, they have to be at this table too, to offer their experiences and some of the solutions that they might have to address the needs of the people who shoot guns. And so that's the group violence intervention stuff, but my law enforcement stuff too, right? At one point in time, our law enforcement partners from probation and parole and DOC and DSP, Wilmington County, and all these other small jurisdictions kind of never really got together and formed a coalition to information share. Now that's happening. And I kid you not, like Wilmington Police Department has a unit, cold case unit that's solving a lot of stuff. And if you committed a crime in Wilmington, a homicide in Wilmington, and it's cold, they coming to get you. I ain't gonna lie. They come. And so, but it's just about information sharing and how different municipalities can share information to solve crimes and to reduce crime and eliminate crime, which is pretty awesome. And so I'm a part of kind of these conversations too, so I can always bring back some of the work that we're doing to this body so we can be well informed. So that's a group, and I want GBI, the leadership in GBI to come and present to this group. I try to make it happen, but in due time, it's not going anywhere. And even the next administration coming in, if they try to do away with group violence intervention, that should be grounds for articles for impeachment. Jimmy articles for impeachment. But Matt's my guy, so I don't think he's.
This question about so it is now for DHS.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
There are positions there, there are mayor positions at DHS.
Yes, yeah.
And Troy, I guess the thing, I'm saying now is, when it's appropriate, you need us to mobilize and then support when from moving forward with the legislative process.
Yeah.
I know you're right.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we're gonna do y'all anything on grouping gang violence? No. All right, cool.
This last week, the state health assessment and state health improvement plan coalition talked about gun violence, and yesterday they had in Lincoln a gun violence, like a mini conference. I went to, but there, it was an in-person meeting, so it was not hybrid. But one of the notes that came out that is one of the safety things that we are discussing, and we talked about it in each of our groups in relation to all of the vital conditions of well-being. So it is also being talked about.
Yes. Thank you. All right, and voting, that's our voting stuff too. And as much as we want to, kind of talk about some of our voting rights and, the importance of voting, and some of these bills that are coming out, like 180, Senate Bill 180, where we want folks who are with diverse backgrounds and diverse criminal histories to be able to vote. There has been a drastic, shift, but there are still some people in the state of Delaware who can't vote. And it's going to be a daunting task for any collection of people to come together to try to get this body of people to vote, right? You have sex offenders who aren't able to vote. You have folks who have committed some white collar crimes who aren't able to vote. Folks who have homicide or manslaughter charges aren't able to vote in our state. And so to get our legislators up to, on the same page to allow these folks, this subset of population to vote, it's going to be a daunting task. So we might have to just break it down into different, Rep. Harris and I and others will probably have to break it down, right? We might just have to leave sex offenders off there, just to be honest. And then just focus on the folks who are just returning home from incarceration that are on probation, trying to get those guys and gals to vote. But it's a daunting task. But we've had some traction, right, throughout the last 10 years, 10 years, where now you can vote while owing fines and fees, right? You just have to be off probation. So Rep. Harris is trying to say, all right, why do we have to be on probation? Let's make some provisions there. So there's some discussion around that, Senate Bill 180, and maybe, if you are paying taxes, well, if you're upholding your civic duty and paying taxes and being an upstanding community member, but there's some discussion around that. There's going to be some people like, nah, hell no, we don't want them people to vote in, and it's up to this collection of individuals to put a face to it. A lot of people, especially sex offenders, right? There's no face to the sex offender guy or gal. Like, I'm the one that's affected by this, and please help me out. And so getting those people to speak up at these larger meetings like Legislative Hall and some, elected officials is really a difficult task to accomplish there. But I firmly believe that our communities aren't well informed on the voting process and why, because most people will want to vote down the line anyway. They're going to vote D's or they're going to vote R's.
Yes.
Without any, you get me? And so I think there needs to be more well-informed community members as to the voting process. And not, maybe just not legislation being drafted, But really, how do we educate people around what it means to get out and vote and some of the issues that may affect a community or an individual? We don't do enough of it. We do enough of, hey, get out and vote and here, sign up. But we don't say why. You know, I mean, I think there needs to be a movement behind why we need to get out and vote. That's in Delaware, but in fact of the matter, Delaware is moving red. You know, and that, I think that's everywhere. We got a whole Sussex County that's red, right? And if you look at the map, it's changing. And, you know, in one way or another, but I still think our community needs to be vulnerable. Whether you're red, whether you're blue or purple, right? And I don't think we do enough of that. So if we can maybe start a subcommittee to just think about some ideas we can have around the education of voting. And maybe not even necessarily voting rights, because people who vote every day but don't know why the hell they're voting. You know what I mean? And maybe it's just the education. That's just my 2 cents there. All right. And so the marijuana. So marijuana, recreational marijuana went into law. You know, they've opened up a platform where they did the lottery. The lottery went out. But the social justice stuff, I think it was a lot of people, right? Like during the last call, like Rob Cooper is my buddy. So I had to ask him some tough questions, but people were coming to me like, yo, Corey, man, I want you on my team and I'll pay you. And I'm like, well, I don't qualify because when I was arrested, I had too much marijuana. I don't qualify. But the social piece, really, a lot of people had filled out applications to be retail marijuana seller.
Mr. Court, you tell them that we've been in contact with Governor Westmore
Yep.
for the last 2 or 3 months. We've got a lot of good information coming back with elections just happening, so we got a lot going on, people transferring office. And what I think the last contact I had was on October 21st, 2024 at 4/11. And what they're doing now is, see, we've got a legislative body that is actually working with us. They had a cannabis forum. June 17, 2024, Governor Moore, they pardoned over 100,000, say it again, for civil possession. Marijuana, civil possession. And so for us, in and out Delaware, we take the lead of courts now to get us the confirmations.
Yeah.
So what we're going to look at, pardoning civil possession of marijuana. What they're going to do is teach us how to do it. We're going to kind of share the information back and forth. And that's what we are right there currently with the governor's office.
Yeah, and we're going to kind of look at that. I think so more conversations around that, right? And kind of looking at, because for me, right, I'm saying, for example, Corey Priest, right, who was arrested for, you know, marijuana trafficking. But you said it was a simple possession, but yet I had a robbery from 2016. I had a possession of crack cocaine 2015. It ain't gonna do me no good to get that simple marijuana possession off my record. It ain't gonna do me no good. And it ain't gonna do no one no good. So most people who have simple marijuana possession also have a bunch of other charges too.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So we're kind of looking at, and with respect to that too, now Delaware has automatic expungement.
Yes.
You know, a law that's automatic expungement, sort of like a criminal credit history. It automatically fall off, right? Problem with that, I wouldn't know if it fell off my record because FBI is not going to send me the letter saying, hey. I wouldn't even know that it fell off my record until I go get my fingerprints done. So we got to figure out how we notify people that their record has been expunged. That's a bullet point. So, because what they want is our money, right? They want the $75 that we're going to pay SBI or Identico to check our criminal history to let us know that, no, you don't have a criminal history in the state of Delaware. And so we need to find a mechanism in which to notify people that their criminal records has been expunged. That's what we're going to work on. You had a question? Yeah.
The bill that you guys working on there, the part that happened before.
No. No, but it'd be something that we'll talk to Matt about. We'll talk to, Governor Meyer about, but it'd probably be after he settle in and, you know, sometime in the summer or so when, you know, it's gonna be some, you know, yeah. Yeah.
And they have these for, say, 3 years, right?
Oh, are you talking about the applications for the marijuana retail? Yeah, yeah.
But I know a couple that I want to just make a straight point. During the conversations, it reminds us that the work we're involved in, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint.
Right.
So we're gonna start stuff already been started, and you just have to keep I know it's like to be a city person.
Yeah.
The iron tries and keep working through it and not be discouraged and putting on that insert, because it's that work every day. So.
Absolutely. I think it's a new administration too, so sometimes things have to materialize, but yeah, absolutely.
So I had a question and also an observation.
Yeah.
So certainly wanted to shout out everything, my team that is working with PBI in the LIT program.
Yeah.
And one of the largest components of this is also civic engagement, right? But we also understood going in and talking about civic engagement. Also, this is a stipend program.
Yes.
When we gave our first check, we found out that the majority of those that in the room didn't have stipend account, right? And so as we're talking about, these issues, there's other services that's needed as well. So I don't know if there can be a recommendation, but when we think about really doing this work and the direct service providers in government, we need funding, right? In order to really do that direct service work, which I think is the impact work, right?
Yes.
So that's my suggestion. Certainly kudos to the urban.
Yeah, urban league, yeah. No doubt.
Yeah, big thumbs up. And some of our folks that have training. We're gonna have to try to maybe.
Yeah, we almost here with it.
About the other committees. But this continues to be good stuff.
Yeah. So I'm pretty much wrapped up. The whole crew left now. No, but so I'm gonna wrap up with that.
Are you merging or taking into consideration the police accountability piece? Is that going to be part of your
Yeah, I thought about that this morning, to be honest, like the Leah Board and kind of getting around the law enforcement accountability.
Yeah.
But they have a law enforcement accountability task force. I don't know if it's sunsetted or not. But that wasn't my original plan, no. But we could have some folks who are very versed in that law enforcement accountability stuff come and kind of merge with it. But as our body, not specifically, no.
Okay.
But I think there's a huge need to address police accountability.
And so I was interested in hearing the report to see if there was any segment of your committee, if they were looking into accountability.
No.
But that would be a great, really this particular operation.
Yeah.
And we time to bring that.
Yeah, merge.
It's kind of important conversation.
Yeah.
Good.
We kind of did have that.
Yeah.
She said police accountability.
Yeah.
Because we talked about like how.
Oh, stacking the charges and things. Yeah. Yeah, we definitely had some conversations around stacking the charges and things like that. And in our AG Jennings, as when she came to the office in 2019, one of her charges were not to prosecute the stacking charges, right? And police do that just so they can kind of secure a conviction, and which is unfair to the person who's being arrested and charged. Yeah. All right, so
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I will just briefly give you updates for the last 3 subcommittees. The Economic Development Subcommittee has not met yet. They are still trying to determine a date. The chair is Lisa Bynum. She's sorry she could not be here today. Her son is ill, so she couldn't come in today. So within the next 3 weeks or so, she will be meeting with members of the subcommittee of economic development. So be on the lookout for that. The other education. Talk a little bit about HB 198 and what we want to do with that particular piece going forward in terms of talking about teaching Black history. The chair, Wally Rushman, could not be here today, so he did inform us that he has to step down as chair. So we're looking for a chairman for education subcommittee, but they are doing the work. They received the recommendation from the Safety and Justice Subcommittee about mental health and young and juveniles, and in school in particular. So they will be looking at that recommendation and bringing forth that conversation we have for the entire Racial Equity Consortium to vote upon. So now that leads us to the health and welfare. Dr. Aw has met with her team at least 2 times, 3 times. She couldn't be here today because she too has a training she had to be in today, but she did send some recommendations, and I will read that for you all. For the most part, the recommendations made by the African American Task Force, that work has already been done. It's ongoing and it's been championed by many groups, organizations, and health systems. So they're just encouraging those people or entities to continue what they're doing. For the subcommittee, it's very important that they pull together their facts, information, and data regarding who's doing what organization is doing. How are our stakeholders perceiving the information and the impact of their work? So again, trying to figure out who's doing what. And the Health and Welfare Subcommittee will identify opportunities to align their work so it can be done across multiple groups. And also to identify gaps that may persist in addressing health equity. So that's the work that they are doing. And finally, one of their recommendations, which we are already doing, was to have a meeting with the new elected officials to tell them about the Racial Equity Consortium, the work that's being done in different communities. So we do have a request in for Governor-elect to meet with him, talk about the Racial Equity Consortium. He has already received the report of the consortium. When I last saw him, I said, I saw your report. So he has it, but we want to have a meeting and talk in depth a little bit more about what we're doing. And plus, there will be some changes with the Racial Equity Consortium in terms of those people who were on the committee, because again, new administration, there'll be new government heads. Carol Hubbard, Secretary of Labor, will not be the Secretary of Labor, so we will need someone else to find out who that person is. But that is what's happening with the last 3 subcommittees. Any questions? Any concerns? Okay. So what I want to do is just reiterate that subcommittees are doing their work. We will have electronic voting because we didn't have a quorum, but there were 6 voting members here. We needed 7. But we will send out information not only with some of the recommendations and having electronic voting. So if the subcommittees can have whatever recommendation you want the Racial Equity Consortium to do by December 12th, that gives you about 3 weeks, a week and a half. December 12th, we will send out a comprehensive list of all of the subcommittee recommendations and then a vote, whether it's an electronic election runner or dot form, Google form, whatever, and then you all will vote that way. So that when we meet in January, we'll have something ready to bring forth to the General Assembly, and also we'll have it ready for a joint policy, public policy agenda for the Delaware Racial Justice Collaborative and Racial Equity Consortium. So the deadline is 12. And since I have floor, I do want to remind everyone to, if you have not done so, please look at the website. We have a lot of information for Delaware Consortium, which is Racial Equity Consortium. Michael will send out a link just in case you don't remember it, so we can look at it. A lot of information on these letters are there, our past are there, the meetings, these meetings are there. Subcommittee work, something work is there. So a lot of information, and what we will do also is be very intentional in sending out this information to all of our friends. A lot of people want to join cultivating, they couldn't, but they want to know what we're doing. So on all of us to talk it up, just as Representative Johnson was saying, we're doing a lot of work. If you're doing it in a vacuum, it's not really that meaningful. So we need to do more in terms of getting the word out. And before I also leave, I want to congratulate Kareem McLaurin. He is now the interim vice president. Here on campus, so congratulations and thank you for your work here on this. And I also want to congratulate Jennifer for the Metropolitan Urban League for their breakfast last week. I heard it was excellent. I was intending to go, but I heard it was very good.
Amazing.
And of course, for our friends in the NAACP for their Freedom Banquet for the Newark chapter, Sussex County chapter, for the great work that you all doing. So thank you and congratulations. And finally, I want to say thank you and congratulations to Michael. Michael is leaving the Racial Equity Consortium on an official capacity. He'll still be around.
We're not letting you go.
I just want to thank Michael and recognize all his great work that he's done.
And I want to start my comments by thanking you for your leadership.
Yeah.
You've been just forefront, you've given us a vision and commitment, and we just want to make sure that we truly know that we appreciate you.
Yes.
Appreciate it. I think that's it. I'd like to thank everyone that's here and that represents, and because with each gathering, we're getting stronger. We're really getting our sea legs. We're getting, the jockey will come out. We're getting engaged. And I think that we're getting our just that feeling that we're on the right road, and we are. And more importantly, we're establishing the partnership, the relationship, and we're not being conflicted. Because that sometimes you're in a situation you feel like you got to live in the world. You don't. What we have to do is partner and establish those relationships and keep our eye on the prize and know that the work that's in front of us is the right stuff. And just thank you all very much. Last but not least, I think the next time we're going to meet in this, it will be 2025. I'll say a really happy New Year, everyone, and happy holidays, and look forward to us to keep on doing great work that we're doing.
Yeah, so, for Ms. Payne's speaks, holidays, we will not have much today. But going forward, we will have it every session, because it gives an opportunity for us to fellowship, have a conversation, and it's good break bread, and talk about what else. All right, but anyway, apologies not for today, but one word we will have it, and our next meeting is January 28th. Just put on your calendar, we usually meet every fourth Tuesday, except for May and November. May and November will be the third Tuesday because of Memorial Day and Thanksgiving. So fourth Tuesday, and it'll be in person as well as hybrid. Ms. Jane.
I want to thank you for being here. The information we received was very, very good. And truly, I have to thank you because I'm telling you, your steadfastness is what keeps us. Yeah, I appreciate it. I do. I really do appreciate it. all the taxes. I'm so sad.
I'm sad too.
So sad.
He's gonna be,
I'll be here.
he's gonna still be.
But I thank each and every one of us for what you're doing, and I'm excited about when the good reports that come forth, and knowing that, we're delving into stuff that, needs to be checked into, and we're bringing forth information that needs to. And I see things taking place, and I think that's, going to the legislators, and going to the public, asking them to make some changes.
And we were missing, we didn't thank Secretary Hunter for her work and her.
Oh, yeah.
She knows you were always wrong.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Everyone have a wonderful day. And take care. Meeting adjourned.
No, no one knows.
Have you in your?
Open.
Oh, that's awesome. Congratulations.
We,